Hi, everyone. Thanks to everybody who's able to jump on right here at 3. We don't have quorum just yet, so maybe we'll give folks another minute to arrive. So far, I'm only counting 5 of the essays of the voting members so far.
Grace Taylor is going to be here at 4.
Okay, thanks. It's hard to keep track as the screen keeps changing. Ooh. For you SAC members who are here, did you have any problem finding your correct link to get here?
It was just on my calendar. I don't know where it came from.
Okay.
Yeah, I had just cut and pasted it into my calendar invitation. So
Okay.
if I hadn't, I don't know where I would have found it. Somewhere buried in my email.
Hi, Anna. Anna, we're just waiting. We're waiting a minute to see when we get quorum. So we can also, we'll end up getting started. I don't want to take any votes until we have quorum. So.
Sounds good. Happy Wednesday, y'all. Happy April.
Yeah, where's the time go?
Beats me.
All right, so what do we got here? Who is sitting far away from a camera? It looks like a really nice room.
Hey, this is Joffrey.
Oh, hi. Thank you. We're waiting a minute to see if we get quorum. We'll continue anyway, but we just won't take any votes yet.
Apparently it's Gian, whatever that is.
Oh boy. I don't have too many people who said they couldn't make it. Well, we're at 3:04. I know people are going to start. I know more people will be joining. So you know what, Liz, if you don't mind, I'm gonna have you go first. Hi, first off, hello, everybody. I'm Grace Rink, your fearless leader, the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. Thank you all for coming. What a packed agenda and how exciting. But it makes me want to just dive right in. But in the interest of like allowing other people to join in, if you don't mind, I'm gonna jump around the agenda. And Liz, if you don't mind, I'll have you go first. Liz's issue does require a vote, but it's a fairly simple thing to discuss. We don't have quorum yet, but we can do the vote when we get that. So Liz, will you take it away, please?
Sure. Thanks, Grace. Good to see everybody. So I am here today representing the Science and Research Committee. Jay sends his apologies. He was not able to make today's meeting. We are proposing to make a change to the bylaws for the Sustainability Advisory Council that would essentially sunset the Science and Research Committee and instead have 1 to 2 science and research seats on the other standing committees of the SAC. The reasoning behind this is that there is a very broad range of expertise that is represented on the Science and Research Committee. And the work, the body of work that is being done in those different areas is really happening in the other standing committees. And so while initially we thought it was a great idea to have that as a separate group and they could be used as maybe a sounding board or to provide input to other committees, given the fact that this is an all volunteer group and schedules and all of those kind of challenges, that coordination hasn't really happened at the level that we hoped. And so we think that it is wise to reflect on what's working well and what could be better. And so I talked with Jay and we shared this proposal with the committee, and we had no objections from anyone in the committee for this. We have offered for anyone whose term doesn't end until 2024 for them to be able to move to another committee of their choice. And so that is the recommendation that we're putting forward today that you all can consider, is sunsetting the Science and Research Committee and instead having science and research seats on the other standing committees of the SAC.
And I'm pleased to report we have quorum now. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for getting here. I did jump around the agenda because Liz's piece was fairly easy to describe. So for those of you who are able to hear everything that Liz had to say, do any of you have any questions about this proposal?
Do you want us to make a motion first, Grace, and then have discussion? Because if so, I so move based on what Liz presented.
Thank you, Parliamentarian Stephen. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, now the floor is open for questions. Questions, comments?
I
I
think
would
it
just-
makes a lot of sense. I think we've been hearing that from the committee since day one. You know, where do we point? How do we go? Put them on the topic committees. Makes a lot of sense to me.
And I'll just go on record as saying, I want to give a big thanks to that whole committee for the work that they did, especially in that first year. You know, it was really important that our agency have scientists, climate scientists and people in other sciences advising us in our work. And our biggest change was our goal, right? Our ultimate goal. We went from a goal of an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050 to a complete elimination, 100% reduction by 2040. That was their recommendation. They brought it to us. We brought it to the mayor. It got approved. And so I hope that they feel that's a pretty big legacy that they provided to us. Okay, absent any other questions, can we take a vote? All those in favor, would you please use oh, wait, no, Naomi, you have your hand is up unless you're voting early.
No, I'm sorry, because I joined right as Liz was closing.
Okay.
Just quick recap of, I know dissolve the group, but where are the group, the committee members gonna go, if possible?
Thanks, Naomi, for the question. So what we have indicated to the committee members is that anyone whose term ends in 2024 can let us know of their preferred top committee or top couple of committees, and we will accommodate them in this selection process this year. And then for others whose term was ending this year, we encourage them to reapply to other committees if they were interested. So that was the conversation we've had, and we've definitely had several members tell us that they're interested in certain committees, and I've let the staff liaisons know of their interests. So we hope to be able to accommodate everybody.
All right, so with that, all those in favor of this proposal to sunset the committee, yep, use the raise hand function, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. All right, no, Blake, you're not a voter, sorry. Okay, great, thank you very much. I think that's actually unanimous from the voting members who are here. Thank you, and thank you, Liz, and thank you to the Science Committee. Wonderful. And now that we do have the quorum, we can go back to the agenda as planned. I would like to go to the Sustainable Transportation Committee. I believe that Stuart is going to give us a presentation about bus coolification. And if you don't, if you have a PowerPoint, you can present it. If you don't, and you want me to pull up the form, I can do that. Or if you just want to speak, you just go right ahead.
Well, thanks, Grace. I do have some examples of bus stops that if you guys ask that question, I can put it on a slide, so they're there available. But this proposal today, which is one of two from the Sustainable Transportation Committee, and let me acknowledge Naomi, who's the co-chair with me on this. Our first proposal is what we call the bus coolification. It is a combination of two elements that are important to increasing transit ridership. One is providing more shelters, benches, and other amenities at bus stops. Currently, out of the 3,000 bus stops in Denver, only 5% have these types of amenities to support travelers. The second element is to theme these bus stops in a way where people feel proud to ride the bus. They feel excited to be there, and they get the environmental message. I mean, one of the things that I personally have found very disappointing is when you go to a bus stop and it's all car ads all around you. It just makes you feel guilty. But there are some innovative types of bus stops, some that have swings, some that have green roofs, and other things that can be symbolic for climate protection and other elements. In addition to that, they can also be themed to a particular community or a character or a theme, so that you get greater buy-in from the community towards transit as being a positive element within their community. So with those two elements pushing forward, getting Dottie to provide more shelters more quickly, there is a list that they have, and it's constrained solely by budget. So this would extend that a little bit further and add in the element to theme these in a particular way for the community. So that's our proposal. I think all of you have received a copy, so I know we're tight in schedule, but are there questions, concerns?
I only just want to raise one point, Stuart, just for everyone's knowledge. This is the type of recommendation that comes to CASR, which then we need to share with our colleagues who actually might be able to do this work, because we don't actually control the bus stations, and bus stops. So just wanted to point that out for the group.
Thank you.
Yes, and we have collaborated with Dottie on this and are working with them. They seem very enthused as well. Certainly any additional monies to this can be very important.
Yeah, and I would just add to Stuart's point, part of this came out of an invitation we had made to staff within the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure to better understand the current management structure. And I think that presentation and really excited our group in terms of understanding where there might be opportunity to leverage these dollars. Anna.
Can we see some of your examples?
Absolutely. Can I share my screen now?
I don't know. I think you can, as long as it lets you.
It says I can't. You make me a
Well, I bet
host.
Here, let me see if I can help.
Chelsea or Taylor can do that. Anna, do you have a question?
I do. I have a question as a transit policy person. So, and I'm also scrolling to make sure it's not answered in here already, but I don't think it is. I see the piece about focusing on the high equity ridership corridors. Do we know among those corridors which ones would ultimately result in the highest number of GHG reductions if we got people out of their cars and more excited to ride the bus via these, via coolification efforts?
Dottie has created a list of their priority bus stops. They're a combination of an equity element within the community that needs to be addressed. It could also be an element that relates to the amount of ridership that is there. But it could also just be a very problematic area where it's too windy or difficult for people. We haven't gone further into determining impacts by corridor, but that is something that we could do as part of this project, and creating a database for us to use in the future and for others to access about how adding these amenities can increase ridership and reduce emissions.
Yeah, I like the latter part of what you just said. That's a good point. Like what, if we were to move forward with this, what would it look like to require one of the next steps to be to figure out among those high equity ridership corridors, which ones would achieve the most GHG reductions overall?
Yeah, great point. Thank you. Can you all see my screen now? These are just different ideas I pulled off the computer. I know certain cities like Philadelphia have actually pursued this on a larger scale and have had great success with it. Others have done it on a spot basis. We have beautifully branded bus stops at Lowry. I'm not convinced that they block the weather issues as best they can, but one's a fork and another is an airplane. But this here would give an environmental message. Grace?
Thanks, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but of course I noticed throughout here, throughout the proposal and in your presentation, you've been talking about Dottie. I'm surprised that Dottie's responsible for bus stop infrastructure and not RTD. Can you address that?
Yes, that is correct. The city is responsible for the bus stops that they have. Now, RTD obviously has some of their own, and certainly the rail stations belong to them. But where it comes to the bus stops on the sidewalk, that is Denver's responsibility.
Thanks.
Here's two more. These are just gardens. Again, they send a different message. Let me go back to the one before. This one on the very left lower side is with recyclable products. So there's a variety of different things that, can send that message that climate change is important. Riding the bus is part of that. And thank you for doing that.
And, our group, I will add, has had a lot of conversations on how we can increase ridership buying up service. And there's, we're thankful to have stakeholders on our committee that help speak to challenges in implementing that in terms of staffing shortages and whatnot. So we feel like we can work towards addressing those in the long term, but in the immediate, what can we do to make it easier for people to ride the bus, especially when we have, I don't want to say extreme weather, but really cold days, really hot days, spaces that aren't accessible for a lot of people depending on their ability. And so that was the thought around just kind of, again, the why in relation to the charge of our group and overall greenhouse gas reduction goals.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like from the document that the question of Dottie taking on maintenance responsibilities and costs is still to be determined.
That is correct. That is an ongoing issue. We are looking at that as well, separately. But the maintenance issue has always been a problem for the city.
Well, remembering Stephen, the parliamentarian, how about if we take a motion to approve in a second? I can't see everybody.
Can I make a motion?
I think you can actually. That's fine.
Okay, so be it.
And I assume there's a second out there somewhere that I can't see. So Stephen, I think you can take down the screen, but those are really great images. Or Stuart. Stephen, I see your hand up.
So I just want to make sure that I understand. So again, this is just a recommendation to Kaiser to work with Dottie on seeing what they can do around this so that they'll have to figure out kind of the money and the maintenance capabilities and all those other things on that side. It's just kind of saying, hey, this is something that we need to look at as a city to make sure that we're making bus stops as good of an experience for the residents as we can, right? Am I kind of hearing that in a nutshell, basically? I just always like to make sure.
Yeah, it allocates funds towards building these different amenities. And so expediting the existing list that Dottie has developed for these types of improvements.
I may have missed that. Are you asking Kaiser to allocate climate protection fund funds, or we're just asking Dottie to allocate its own funds?
We're asking Kaiser to add dollars to this pot.
Oh, I think I missed that. Okay.
That was where I was trying, yeah.
I don't think I
you.
saw that.
That's what I
in
was
here.
trying to clarify is where that, my question was, where is the money right now currently residing that is requested?
Yeah, probably could have made that explicit, but I think we were operating under, the charge of like how we can help advise like your use of the climate protection funds under the allowable expenses. But we cannot make that more explicit in the recommendation.
And it looks like I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I think Councilmember Cashman, you are next.
Yeah, just wanting, Stuart, if you don't mind, at some point, after questions are answered, to get a specific wording of your proposal.
Okay,
Thank you.
That's in, Mr. Cashman, well, I think Naomi dropped that into the chat. So if you click on that Google Doc, that is the proposal itself.
Great, thank you very much.
So go ahead, Anna.
So my question was related to the cost thing too. It looks like on one of the sections, it says the team estimates a $1 million budget. Is that the specific proposal?
that is this proposal, and depending on how the results are, there may be additional dollars in the future that might be sought.
Then on behalf of CASR, I would definitely say, could you please add a line in there saying that what the request is, the recommendation is actually for CASR to allocate $1 million of climate protection fund money to build these bus shelters.
Great. We will.
Because, yeah,
I'm
even I didn't pick up
confused
on that.
because if you read what it says, it says the committee is flexible in how much funding to assign to this recommendation, as well as the best pathway for distributing funding. The team estimates that 3 bus stops plus others would be $1 million. So it's what was sent to us was more, I felt, look into it and CASR can assign a budget to it, but it's a big leap to say fund it at $1 million.
Yeah, I think, we try to strike that balance of like what this could look like without dictating what it should look like in terms of cost, because we know that that's not our role. So that's where I think we try to, here's what it might look like should there be, I think the recommendations that, work on 10 bus stops, but it could be less, it could be more, but it really is beholden to the ongoing conversations that we hope to come through the recommendation.
Because I think it really matters to the vote, because if you're just saying this is a great idea and we want CASR to look into it and come back to us and tell us what they think, that's a very easy ask. If it's to do $1 million, that might feel different, but Grace, do you have any guidance for us on that? Or are you okay if it's the more general?
I'm actually okay both ways. I think that even if, now that I'm more clear that it's actually asking CASR to allocate dollars and not just go to Dottie and talk with them about, accelerating bus and bus shelters and also just making them more interesting. I see those as almost two different things. Like we can do both, right? We at CASR, we would need to take a look at our allowable uses. And is this something that we think would be a wise investment of those dollars in the transportation category? It might, but again, our obligation is to look at that and come back to you. We can do that and also talk to Dottie about what are their plans for bus shelters, and is there a way to make them more interesting than what they may have planned already?
Thanks, that helps a lot as somebody who's supposed to vote on it. If there's more steps to it than just saying, do it. So good.
Yes.
Mr. Cashman, is your hand up again or just still up?
Yes, it is
Okay.
up again. I'm like fully supportive of the need to improve our bus shelters. I mean, it's without question one of the important steps in getting people to use mass transit. It just feels like this proposal is not baked enough, so to say, sure, let's throw $1 million at it. It might be, let's throw 3 million, but I'm feeling like I need more research done on it as to what it would look like, how much each bus shelter would actually be. But I want to be clear, I'm prepared to support it wholeheartedly with a little bit more information.
And Mr. Cashman, I think actually that's part of our job. Once the
Right.
recommendation comes to us, is
Right.
we then have to go take a look at that, look at these estimates. We talk to Dottie, we find out what's this really like. I mean, the designs that Steven showed are really awesome. That would have to go out to bid, right? Those aren't just things off the maybe some of them are off the shelf that are available. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think falls to the staff to explore a little bit and then come back and report.
Right. So it's a recommendation that the committee thinks we should contribute $1 million to this project. But before that gets done, CASR will look at it and report back.
Correct.
Thank you very much. I am ready to say sure.
Are there any other questions or comments? Sometimes it's hard to see the little hands.
Hey, Grace, as part of that kind of report back phase, is that when we could have more information about like which shelters would be the highest impact as far as getting people out of cars?
Well, I think that now that you've said that, that's the kind of thing we could look at. So for example, what I just mentioned about the possibility that maybe Dottie would have to go out to bid for designs, right? So then that would be a piece of information we would come back with, and that would either be something that they can move on right away, or that increases the cost, increases the time. It's just more information that we could come back with.
Cool, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor of moving this recommendation to CASR, please raise your hand, your virtual hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. That again looks unanimous from the voting members. Thank you very much. And so staying with transportation, I believe you have some guests with you to present the next one, the East Colfax Mobility Benefits District. Stephen, is your hand up? Okay.
Right.
So, yes, Lori.
I just wanted to see if we could have sort of a standing part of these meetings be to report back on recommendations we've made. So that
We usually do. We did that in the last meeting, and actually we have one on the agenda today if we get to it.
Great, thank
So
you.
yes, and we do always have the, I can drop into the chat, the Google Doc where we staff our, every once in a while we populate it with an update. So yes, normally I think that would have been a standing item, but because we have so many recommendations today, I didn't plan a full update. Okay, transportation. East Colfax Mobility Benefits District. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm just going to introduce John Hersey, who's going to talk with us. And Joffrey, you're still there. Look at all these faces. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Council. Very nice to be with you today. I do have a presentation. I understand we don't have a lot of time, so I will move quickly through it and hope that you have reviewed it ahead of schedule. I'll try to share my screen here. Looks like I'm okay. Okay, are we seeing my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. All right, I'll move to the slideshow. So I won't be able to see you anymore, but if you have a question, oh no, I still can. Great. Okay, so again, nice to be with you all. Here's where we're going in short time. Quick introduction, examples of mobility benefit districts across the country. What an East Colfax Ave Mobility District could look like in Denver. And then I want to be sure to leave plenty of time for discussion like we just had on bus qualification. So my name is John Hersey. I lead Sustainable Urban Planning Advisors and also teach at CU Boulder. Joffrey Chiapella is here as well. Joffrey is a senior planner at Dr. Cog. So the Sustainable Transportation Committee, as you may well know, our mission is to work closely with Dottie to, in part, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. Light duty vehicles, i.e. cars, contribute a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions to our environment every day. The committee also is intended to increase transportation access. These two bar charts show research from RTD showing that if folks have eco passes, then whether they are low-income households on the left or market rate households on the right, they are more likely to take transit, significantly more likely to take transit. Alternatively, if they have free parking, they are much more likely to drive, speaking to the greenhouse gas emissions that I noted before. The committee also intends to provide more affordable transportation options. On the right, we have data from AAA showing, I picked a 2017 Ford to show that driving is expensive. I think we all know this. $16,000 just to buy the car, to say nothing of the annual cost to operate, maintain, insure, etc. We can't fall back on driving as a equitable, affordable transportation option. We also intend to make service more equitable. This is a long quote from a New York Times article about a new book. But basically, once again, we can't rely on driving as an equitable way of getting around, whether that is who is driving or how much money those people have to drive. Again, it's just not something we can rely on for mobility. And finally, our committee considers support for more equitable transportation services. I think we'll find that mobility benefit districts help to achieve each of these bullets. In support of, I should say, support of multimodal investments. So in broad strokes, every mobility benefit district or parking benefit district, as they're otherwise known, is a little different. Each one has their flavor, but in broad strokes, they often rely on a combination of generating revenue from on-street parking, typically at meters, but not always, sometimes at kiosks, on-street permits, and off-street contracts. Those on-street meters, it's difficult to dial in equity or equity consideration for on-street meters. However, on-street parking, free short-term parking, 15-minute parking is one way of doing so. On-street parking is meant to be that high turnover availability, so we expect that providing short-term free parking is one way to provide lower cost parking for all. On-street permits, the city has a number of on-street neighborhood parking permit areas. This is for medium turnover, and it does allow for adjusting incomes, adjusting the cost of those permits based on income. Off-street contracts, this is an example of being able to leverage the city's immunity to access business, private property, private parking lots after businesses have closed. You think of here the First Bank at Franklin and East Colfax, for example. If we could access that parking lot for folks to get to Voodoo Donuts across the street, for example, that may be an opportunity to expand parking while also charging more for it. This off-street contracts as well can be income adjusted. But the real point here, and I don't want to dance around the fact that mobility benefit districts are designed to get revenue from parking. That is true, and I don't want to pretend that it doesn't. But it does so in the interest of generating revenue for investments in multimodal programs. Those can be transit passes. Those can be increased access to micromobility services, maybe through subsidies or just expanding those programs. Streetscape maintenance, whereas the city may be fine with building a wonderful streetscape, who's going to maintain it? Mobility benefit district revenue can go to maintaining those spaces. Parklets, art installations, just making corridors a more inviting, lively place to be. Some examples of mobility benefit districts around the country, in Boulder, where I'm standing right now. Downtown, the Central Area General Improvement District, or CAGID, is a mobility benefit district. I'm not going to spend time going through all the numbers, but I do want to emphasize that all employees downtown get eco passes, and the revenue also helps to subsidize bike share memberships and public Wi-Fi service. In our conversations with city staff in Austin, Portland, and Pittsburgh, we've learned that access to Wi-Fi is increasingly important, and so increasingly a barrier. In Boulder, part of the revenue from parking goes to expanding public Wi-Fi service. In Austin, there are a few different ways that Austin does it. Again, not going to go through the details of what's collected and how they spend it exactly, but do call your attention to enhancing sidewalks, crosswalks, benches, streetscape, promoting alternative transportation to reduce vehicle miles traveled. In Pittsburgh, a corridor similar to Colfax in many ways, they generate revenue and dedicate it to expanding, increasing lighting and signage, street striping, permit monitoring, additional security and patrols, not necessarily Pittsburgh police, but private patrols like you might see with DDP and the purple shirts downtown, and also rideshare parking management. Since Pittsburgh has instituted their program, rideshare has increased 20%, while crime has decreased 37%. That was pretty striking for me anyway. And then in Columbus, Ohio, once again, discounts for off-street parking with those off-street contracts. They dedicate their money to validating parking and education campaigns, getting people to understand just where they park, how they can park, and also how they can access multimodal programs to get around this district without a car. Park once and then get around on bike, on foot, on scooter, what have you. Importantly, Columbus offers discounts of on-street permits for low-income households. Joffrey and I believe that's an opportunity to consider for the East Colfax MPD as well. And then finally, finally in Portland, 51% of revenue goes to support what Portland calls a transportation wallet, very much a transportation demand management credit account where users can dedicate a variety of funds to a variety of ways of getting around. Again, not just a car. They can buy transit fare. They can buy bike share. I believe they even could dedicate their funds to Uber, Lyft, and other transportation network companies. Interestingly, in Portland, they did build a parking facility with this revenue, and also rely on local stakeholders, as we proposed with East Colfax. Local stakeholders determine how much to collect and how to spend it. So in East Colfax, Joffrey and I, and Stuart and Naomi by extension, imagine an East Colfax MBD that complements BRT service. BRT is going to be a wonderful thing. It is going to generate a bunch of new transit riders, and that's a wonderful thing. But how are those riders going to access the service? There are no park and rides planned for East Colfax BRT, and so we anticipate a lot of driving, as close as people can get, parking in neighborhoods, driving to the corridor, driving to the stations, and then getting on the service. We can do better. So insofar as we're considering the geography of where this mobility benefit district would take place, we imagine it consistent with the BRT corridor, Broadway to Yosemite, and also from about 17th to 18th, those commercial corridors on 17th to 18th Ave, and 12th and 13th Ave to the south. As I've hinted at, East Colfax Mobility Benefits District would be an incremental increase in parking fees, whether those are on street or through the permit process or through contracts or off-street property. Today it's $2 per hour. We're not going to propose what it should be. It could be a penny, it could be $1. We don't know. It's not for us to determine, but it would be something. Also, this is not to say that tomorrow Mayfair will get parking meters. No. Instead, it's to say that this policy is in place so that when the city does decide to start charging for parking in Mayfair once demand comes around, perhaps when the BRT service comes around, then this policy already is in place for Mayfair to hold on to some of that parking revenue if it so chooses. The on-street permits will help to manage that outflow, that bleed based on demand for getting on BRT. And we expect that those contracts with businesses will help to alleviate concern for those who really want to park on East Colfax. Maybe it costs more to park on the street, but there are a variety of off-street parking options for you if you so choose. So the mechanics specific to East Colfax, and this looks similar to what we saw generally, specific to East Colfax. Once again, we have the meters or kiosks, if you will, high turnover, free short-term parking, permits. The city has a policy that allows the city to collect on-street permit revenue only as much as it costs to administer that program. Fair enough, but we imagine a program that could cross-subsidize parking meter revenue to discount those parking meters for lower income households who live near the corridor. And then again, also there's the off-street contracts where the city also could income qualify those who choose to receive a permit to park off-street. Specific to those investments, as one of my first slides noted, RTD EcoPass. If this program can generate revenue to afford subsidize RTD EcoPasses for business employees as well as residents nearby, that would be a huge win. And we think that we would get more people on transit as a result. But that's not the only thing that MBD can do. We also could expand access to micromobility, including charging, which is something else the Sustainable Transportation Committee is looking at. Expand on-street parking. Get my menu out of the way. On-street parking discounts, streetscape maintenance. Again, Dottie may want to make some investments in streetscape, but doesn't have the funding to maintain it. Maybe the MBD could. Also, business grants and competitions, streetscape improvements, storefront improvement grants, that kind of stuff. There's really nothing the MBD couldn't fund, in our opinion. And we know we're early. That's probably promising too much, but it is a very versatile program once you collect the revenue. We also expect that members would drive this decision. It's not me and Joffrey, it's not the Sustainable Transportation Committee, it's not even SAC or CASR. It's people who know the corridor best. So it's business groups. Joffrey and I have spoken with Franco Ligantore and Monica Martinez, two business leaders in the corridor. We expect RNOs would have a seat at the table as well, and nonprofits like Denver Streets Partnership or Stewart's Transportation Solutions. People who know the corridor and transportation best should have a guiding role in this. We also expect advisory members would be city staff and council members, as well as partner organizations like RTD, DRCOG, and CDOT.
John, could you summarize, are you able to summarize? People have had a chance to read this and time is extremely limited.
Yes.
Can you expedite?
Yep. Okay. So points about sustainability, 3 legs of sustainability that we'll miss, and then we'll jump to questions and discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go ahead and try to summarize again what the ask is of CASR. So in this case, there's not a monetary ask for our agency, but rather it is to advocate to DOTI to consider this type of mobility benefits district for this particular corridor. And ultimately, if DOTI were to agree to this, this would be an ordinance, right? Because it includes fees, like an increase in fees that have to be directed a certain way. And so that ultimately DOTI would need to take this to city council. So, but the request here is for CASR to advocate to DOTI. Is that correct?
That is correct. There may be a role for a part-time executive director to kind of herd the various cats that I showed as the partners, but I think primarily right now the ask is to, yes, be a partner, advocate with DOTI to include it in their planning of the corridor now and eventually in an ordinance to city council.
All right. So all right, to be official, we'd like to have a motion to approve in a second. And John, I think you can take your presentation down.
Okay, yes, of course. Sorry.
That's okay.
That's good.
If somebody wants to call an audible on that, I can't see. There we are.
Thank you.
I see it. I see Naomi. Naomi, is that your hand up to speak and to, all right, go ahead.
No, that's a motion. I just wanted to.
You're the motion. All right, good.
Yes,
We have a second. Anyone? All right, Mr. Cashman, thank you. Okay, so let's open the floor to questions.
I think I'd just like to say in the future, when people fill these out, it would really help if we had in that first section what the ask is. So, because it was very unclear to me. I mean, I get the concept, it sounds great, but why us now when? I'm fine with it. I am struck, Grace, that we are always asking DOTI for things. It's it's like, is that our role to be the advocate to DOTI full time?
Yeah, Laura, I'll just say it's a tricky point because we're transportation beyond like electric vehicle infrastructure and some other aspects is not under their purview of CASR. So I definitely hear you and that. So we try to, I think, mind that balance, but also, see this council and our amazing climate as a partner as we think about greenhouse gas reductions from transportation.
And Naomi, I only say that because all of zero waste is also, let's go ask DOTI.
Yes.
So
we just have DOTI in here.
I'm only raising my hand to say that actually so much of what our office wants to accomplish is dependent on other agencies. And so that's why we do lead with collaboration. We try to be good partners to other agencies. So yeah, DOTI's a big one. They've got a lot under their tent, but so does Parks, so does Community Planning and Development. Those are the big 3 that we work with most closely, but there's other agencies as well. I see Stephen's hand.
Yeah, so one of the questions, so based kind of off what Lori was mentioning, we are going to DOTI with a lot. Did I understand, John, correctly that this program, while it would be under DOTI, the benefits district will ultimately end up managing it on their behalf? So the standing up of the program would involve them, but the actual running and maintenance and all of that would actually be, once an ordinance, I guess, Grace has put forth, that benefits district would manage the program. So DOTI wouldn't necessarily have to have staff on the ground doing that. Is that a correct statement?
I believe that's correct. Yeah, the revenue generation involves DOTI. I suppose I suppose there's nothing stopping the bids, the RNOs, et cetera, from forming a committee now, but they have no revenue to leverage. So yes, eventually the meter angle would have to go through Dottie, would have to go through City Council. But at that point, yeah, I believe the MBD moves on its own. It could be that Dottie assigns staff to work with to coordinate the MBD, or the MBD could hire its own staff, and it could work very much internally with monthly participation from Dottie staff just to see that they're on the same page. But the Mobility Benefit District very much guides its own destiny. It collects, and the city collects, but MBD holds its revenue and then dictates that revenue as the MBD sees fit.
We're doing okay on time because we had Liz go first, but we do need to make sure that we keep going. Does anybody have any questions that you think would lead to an objection against this proposal? All right, that being said, can we take a vote? All those in favor of moving this on to CASR, raise your hand. I've got 5, 6. All right. Not everybody. Okay, but we still have a majority of those here today. Thank you very much. Thank you, transportation. And moving on, buildings and homes. I know Armando's here. Armando, is Armando presenting or no? Marianne, I see you. Are you presenting for this one?
I think Stephen and I are co-presenting. Is that right, Stephen?
Yes.
Oh, I was thinking energy. Sorry.
That's
Oh,
all right.
I
So
got
I'm
all mixed
building
up.
home.
Okay,
Marianne's
so
resilient.
Stephen and Marianne. Wait, Mr. Cashman, I see your hands up. Okay. Okay, Stephen and Marianne, take it away.
So this one's relatively simple. And I'll get straight to kind of the point because hopefully everybody read the recommendation summary. Basically, what our proposal is asking is based on conversations that we had between our two committees, particularly starting in ours, when we were looking at the green building ordinance. And now that we have Energized Denver, there's a lot of conflicting rules, or so to speak, around that. So we were looking at how are we going to look forward at simplifying or potentially green building ordinance going away because Energized Denver should be taking its place. So looking at existing buildings and new construction under the green building ordinance, what our committee found was one of the challenges within that ordinance that is not currently covered under Energized Denver is everything dealing with green space. And as we started looking, and part of the reason that we reached out to Marianne's committee on resilience is that the city doesn't really have a plan surrounding how are we going to handle green space and water resiliency. So we're basically this proposal, all we're asking is that CASR, when the new administration comes on board, ask the leadership, new mayoral leadership, to convene a meeting of all of the departments that would be relevant within the city to have conversations about creating a citywide green and water resilient plan. So how does it, how does that manage with Dottie, Parks and under Row right away, Parks and Rec with the parks and et cetera. A lot of this would kind of lend itself down to then, based on kind of what the city might come up with, would give residents kind of a lead on kind of what kind of plants and things should be planted within their yards and et cetera, et cetera. So that's all we're doing is asking for the conversation at the city to happen. So then what, from there, we'll look at what needs to go into ordinances and et cetera to take care of green space with new construction, what kind of things happen in the right of way. An example is, Downtown Denver Partnership has this great tree program because they've learned that most of the tree pots for down in sidewalks are not big enough, so trees don't live as long. How do you, better make those viable plantings happen? And so like I said, we started down the green path, but when we got with Marianne's group, the whole water resiliency piece came up. And so I know she has a little bit more experience in that than me, so I'll let her kind of fill in anything that I haven't touched on.
Thanks, Stephen. So I'll just share my, oh wait, I'm not allowed to share my screen. but you guys can see, I put the recommendation link in the chat box. And our intention with this is really to focus on
Hey,
creating.
Mary, and you can share your screen now.
Oh,
if you want to go
thank
ahead.
you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Thanks. So this is
Oh,
the recommendation. You all are welcome to take a look at this. And really, when we're talking about landscape codes, many municipalities, especially in the Western United States, are looking at landscape codes to make their cities more resilient to climate change. What we're seeing is that we're in a mega drought, and so water resilience, drought resilience is key when we're looking at landscapes. Over 50% of our water use is on outdoor landscapes. So this is a linchpin issue, I think. So we would not predetermine what goes into the landscape code, but we did list things that we thought should potentially go into it, including regionally native and adaptive plants, drought tolerance and water-wise landscaping, balancing water conservation goals with aesthetics, limiting non-functional turf, which is being done by other municipalities around the country, and then moving towards organic landscaping as well. So there's a lot in here. This would need to be determined in collaboration with other departments and community outreach, as is usual for codes. But we thought that this was a strong recommendation, and both of our committees unanimously approved this. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll vote to make a motion to approve that CASR look into creating a task force with other departments to look into creating a citywide green and water resilience program plan.
Lori,
second.
oh, okay, thanks.
Could I open with a question of, can you tell us a little bit about how the two committees worked together to make this happen?
Yeah.
Well, our committee started talking, like I said, around the whole green building ordinance, and there, it can kind of more conflicting pieces with Energize Denver. And there's actually another proposal that we're currently working on. And it was discovered that with existing buildings, because of the limit of space, et cetera, most of those buildings under the green building ordinance weren't doing anything with green space. They were all opting out for the reduction of energy because that's something that's already kind of on the plate to be done. And so as we looked at that, we didn't want, under the existing buildings, we didn't want that to be lost as part of the overall plan for the city, right? We need to make sure that we maintain those green spaces that we have, and where we can expand, have that option to do so, but do it in a way that is sustainable and resilient. So it was actually Katrina on our group that kind of connected us on with the resilience, because she saw the connection there. And so the two committees kind of had a task force offline that worked through, and Mary Ann's had a lot of experience on the water side. And so from that task force, we created the proposal, and then each committee reviewed it internally for approval from our own committees. But it was a great conversation to be had, and I think it turned into something bigger and more exciting, I think, than what it would have come just from, say, our building and home side.
Thank you. I just really appreciate that as an example of cross-committee collaboration. I can't quite see any other hands up right now. I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'm going to call on Liz so that she can give us a moment to speak about a project that she's been spearheading with other agencies that's related to this.
Thanks, Grace. So I, a couple months back, set up an interagency climate resilience working group that includes DOTI, parks, community planning and development, and other agencies critical to this work, to really talk about how we take existing recommendations, whether it's policy, programs, or projects in all of the city plans, things like Blueprint Denver, a lot of the different parks plans, the One Water Plan, et cetera, and decide as an agent, as a team of various agencies, what to prioritize moving forward. So our charter is really to create a strategy to move forward high impact climate resilience work in the city, and to do that in a way that we're also kind of preparing for this transition with the new administration to be able to bring forward some of those high impact ideas. So we just recently completed an exercise where we looked through all of the existing city plans, and each person was asked to kind of pull out a couple of their top priority projects or programs or policies. And then we did an evaluation of impact versus difficulty. We also did an evaluation of equity and environmental justice impact versus difficulty to see if that would be different than the overall kind of general climate resilience impact. And so we were really trying to understand which things were going to rise to the top. And I think certainly policies around landscape and water were definitely some of the top things that we discussed in that meeting, alongside some of the other real human-centered needs that we have around adaptation and resilience, like cooling, et cetera. So we are in that process right now. And so this recommendation you're bringing forward is really aligned with where we've been thinking internally we need to be moving.
Thanks. And did I skip the motion to approve? Yes. Right, so I didn't do it. Do we have a motion to approve?
No, I made a motion to
Oh,
approve.
you did? Okay, good. Thank you.
And I think Lori seconded.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's right. Things go right through my brain, Stuart. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, do we have other questions or comments about this proposal?
So just to confirm, the request is for CASR to create a task force, you said, right? To pursue some of these things? I'm
Yeah.
rereading.
Yeah,
Okay.
is for CASR to convene, and it sounds like based on what Elizabeth has said, there's probably already a group together.
Yeah.
That hopefully then she can take this and say, hey, the Sustainability Advisory Council is reinforcing some of what we've already figured out. And so that will hopefully then give a lot more weight to when they talk with the new administration on making this a priority for the city to move forward.
Yeah,
Right.
I would say there's a little slight difference here in that the group that Liz is working with is internal. It's all city staff. And your recommendation is much more about one of our like external facing stakeholder engagements. And so
It would be both. It would combine. So basically
Okay.
this would say we're taking that group maybe that Liz has already convened that has people from, and then involve stakeholder groups like homeowners associations, you know, maybe the landscaping association, some of those stakeholders that would be able to convene to help them, kind of like we're doing with Waste No More, right?
Right.
Convene what would make the best parts of a plan to move forward for the city. That would include both green management of green space and water.
Okay. Thank you for that. Other questions?
I just want to mention to Liz, I'm excited by what you're doing. I put 2 links in the chat other than our recommendation link. One is on how to support reducing car emissions in Denver. We did that in 2020 for the city and county of Denver. And then one on our WaterWise report, which we recently released, which covers a gamut of recommendations related to how municipalities and others can create WaterWise environments.
All right, thank you. All right, are we ready to vote? All those in favor of advancing this to CASR for follow-up? Once again, it looks unanimous. And hello, Jay. Good to see you. All right, thanks, everybody. And thank you to the co-leadership of 2 committees working together. And all right.
And thank you to Katrina and her team for helping convene the
Yes.
2 committees together. So.
Great. Anna, do you have your hand up? That's okay.
I just haven't lowered it, sorry.
Yes, I see Katrina applauding. Thank you. All right, Harmony. Harmony, you are up next. And I wonder if I can't tell from the screen if you brought anyone else with you. And
I did not.
Okay, but I think you're ready to screen share. I think Chelsea gave you that. So Harmony is with us today from the Environmental Justice Committee. Lubna is one of our co-chairs there. She's on maternity leave, so she's not with us. And then Jason has stepped down because he's advancing at work and just isn't able to work with us right now. And so Harmony is here representing the whole Environmental Justice Committee. So please take it away, Harmony.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. I'm here to propose an environmental justice pilot program. Let me make sure my screen is, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I do a lot of work in community. I run a nonprofit in Elyria that pairs music, movement, arts with environmental justice and healing. We are ground zero for environmental injustice in Denver. We sit on 2 EPA Superfund sites. We are surrounded by the I-70 expansion projects, Suncor Refinery, the gas plants. One of the moms that I most work with and aim to amplify the voice of is Lucy Molina, who lives in the shadow of the Suncor Refinery. And she always says, for far too long, our community voices have not been at the table for the decisions that directly impact our family's health and the health of our neighborhoods. She has this term, educate to regulate. And what's important to her in these times is educating her community to help bring stronger regulations and protections, and also to bring healing. We need that in this world. The issue, there's a huge disconnect between the policymakers and the residents who are most disproportionately impacted by the decisions being made. The solution to create a replicable program that engages, educates, and empowers residents from disproportionately impacted communities to have a meaningful voice and participation in upcoming air, water, and climate change rulemaking proceedings. In addition, there always seems to be a disconnect between available resources and the needs of the community. So building bridges between like some of the great programs that Kaiser has to offer, like healthy homes, or maybe finding asthma inhalers. There's a lot of really small, I call it pollution and solutions that we could be doing at the same time. The task of the Environmental Justice Support Fund is to design and pilot a program to empower community members in Denver's disproportionately impacted communities to have their voices heard. Like I mentioned, the educate to regulate, to build capacity, and to create authentic civic engagement. It would help if I looked at my notes. You know, one of the things that happens most, let me back up one slide. When I go out in community to try to talk about air pollution, one of the things that comes back to me is Harmony. My rent was $600 in 2018. Now it's $2,000 for a 2-bedroom that touches the highway. In addition, my 12-year-old son was just diagnosed for diabetes. I can't tell him to go to the park to play because there's so many men in the park drinking and doing drugs. And I'm afraid to tell him to go for a walk because of gun violence. And so when the ladies in the community tell me these things, I'm like, how am I supposed to even begin to talk to you about air pollution? Yet in the rapid assessments that Jorge did in the neighborhood that I got to help host, air pollution was by far the #1 issue and concerns. As someone who works in the neighborhood 4 minutes away from the Suncor Refinery, you see it, you taste it, you smell it, and you feel it. It's definitely, you know, I always say in this, I'm a mom and I'm here because I'm scared for the future of my children and all the babies, but also it's unfair that the quality of the air that my kids breathe is better than the air quality of other kids in this city. And until we rectify that, I just think we should all be working towards that as a goal. What this program aims to do is to make sure that residents feel heard and are informed about the health impacts related to air toxins, emissions, unsafe water, and other environmental racism and other systemic issues that kind of bring us to where we are today. Some of the biggest issues for people to participate in rulemakings is they don't even know that the rulemakings are happening. They don't know how to participate in these things. But then at another level to that, there's issues with barriers of language, access to internet. There's a lot of people in the communities that I work with that don't have computers, maybe don't even have smartphones. It would be really hard to participate meaningfully in this world without those things. Then there's childcare, and then capacity. Like I was mentioning, the mom whose rent's been more than doubled and was working 2 to 3 jobs. So it's really important that we try to alleviate some of these various barriers to folks. Part of this will be that coalitions will be built, especially not just within the community, but with other scientists, doctors, curators, educators, and community leaders. There will be, we want to make sure that these things are done culturally sensitive and neighborhood based. The neighborhoods throughout Denver are very, very, very different from each other. Elyria, the community that I work in, is significantly different than Sun Valley, is different from Montbello, and is definitely different than Wash Park. Environmental and restorative justice through material reductions of pollution. we need more voices, and we especially need more impacted community voices at these rulemaking hearings. Right now, industry has a lot of money to pay staff to be there and experts. And like I mentioned, because of all the barriers, we don't get to have a meaningful voice for community. And it's time that we use these funds to help us do more, to bring more voices to the table. What this program looks like, it'll be a 3-phase program. The first year will be to design a pilot. The second year will be to develop what the curriculum will look like. And the third year part will be to go out into community and have organizations and community leaders go out and test the curriculum out in community. We want this to be replicable. We want it to, and the whole aim is to be in alignment with the Climate Protection Fund's goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing pollution, and increasing meaningful participation for community members, and while also creating adaptability, climate adaptability for residents, especially our residents who have most been left behind. In phase 1, there will be an advisory group. I've seen Cultivando, they're a group out of Commerce City in North Denver who are doing great strides for community air program monitoring. They designed something similar to this, where they got these great doctors, scientists, people who specialize in air quality to say, hey, who are the experts to help us inform our community? And then this project will also have a steering committee, and that steering committee will be made up of the organizations who are out in community, who understand the community needs and the obstacles, the barriers, and what their communities look like, so that they can work together between the advisory group and the steering committee to provide, to see these are the issues, these are what needs to be addressed, and to have the experts give the science and the medical health data that needs to then go back out to community. So it's it's like a, what is that? The infinity loop of information going through all of these agencies back and forth as we design this, test it, and whatnot. And so, yeah, the advisory group will produce and design the recommendations for the Environmental Protection Justice Support Fund, and the steering committee will be the ones who, they will be the ones who give the criteria for selecting the advisory group, and also review what the designs that come forward and give continual feedback. And phase 2, let me look at my notes over here real quick, don't mind me. In phase 2, the program manager will develop the program. At this point, we'll also look to subcontract certain services that will be needed to make the program. This is an educational pilot program. So there needs to be curriculum, worksheets, surveys, handouts, maybe there's some video content that needs to be created, also maybe some social media. Whatever is needed to have kind of a prefab curriculum to take out to community, to teach your community about these are the environmental harms, these are the things currently in place of why we are where we are today. And then here are upcoming rulemakings that folks can participate in. And here are the steps and how people can participate. I'm just looking here. The steering committee, yep. The steering committee will be back involved in this process to go out into community and say, hey, does this work for you? Also asking their organizations and their leaders and the people who will doing the training. What if this has been successful? Maybe what if this do we need to change? Yeah, and again, just a lot of facilitating, working amongst each other and trying to develop the program. And then the third part is to pilot the program, to actually have 3 organizations out in community who will test this out. I know for me working in Elyria, these are the things that we most need. It's really, really hard because of some of those barriers that I just mentioned, but it's also, it would be fantastic to have some expertise of this is the best science for asthma. This is the best science for PM2. This is the best for lead in water, which is an issue in a lot of communities in Denver. And then also at the same time, trying to bring some solutions because it's really hard when you just come with the this is the doom and gloom, but here's your solutions from a regulatory standpoint of rulemakings of how you can participate. An example I'll give is the upcoming GEM 2 rulemaking, in which the largest top 20 emitters of greenhouse gas emissions must reduce their emissions by 20%. And right now that rulemaking is going on, and there's tons and tons about DI communities, and it's really, really important. We're hearing from city officials and counties that there is a want for rulemakers to hear more from community. So we need to figure out ways to bridge that gap to get the people who are making decisions to hear the voices of those who are impacted. In addition, while we're doing this, we can bring simple solutions to help people that day that they can go home with, possibly making an air filter out of a box fan in your heater air filters at home, maybe being able to provide asthma inhalers or whatnot. There's a lot of things that are really basic that we could be pairing communities up. And like I mentioned with Healthy Homes, just letting people know in community that here's a way that you can access this program to help improve your living conditions. Again, I think this would go a long way to making Denver a more beautiful place. And then at the end, ultimately, this is about empowering our communities. We need this. Like I mentioned, the rapid assessment said that air pollution is our top concern, and especially in North Denver. Like I mentioned about the CPF goals, the climate protection funds, we've been, the work of the Kaiser office has been doing great things for years now, and it's really time to like up our EJ game. And I think that we all throughout, not just in the communities that are most impacted, but also eventually to the communities that aren't, to understand the impacts that our day-to-day decisions have on other parts of the city that we maybe have never even experienced or ever been to before. So I think that there's a lot of education that needs to happen all around. And we all need to come together in these times to, find solutions and co-create for some of our biggest challenges of these times.
Thanks, Harmony. That was a lot. And I really appreciate you. I know, and I've obviously been with you in the committee for months now, as you all have worked on this really, really hard. And so I appreciate all the effort that you and the other committee members, and even some people not on the committee, that you all have put into this proposal. So first, let's open with the motion to approve in a second, and then we can get to conversation. Anyone? We got Naomi and Jay. Thank you so much. Okay, let's open the floor to questions. Questions, comments for Harmony? I'm not seeing any hands up. Lori.
Harmony, you might have said this because I glanced away, but who is the project manager that you keep referring to in this?
That would be awarded. That would be a seat. Somebody would choose that through this. I believe it would probably be an RFP.
Right. So I should have clarified your recommendation is for CASR to actually create an RFP to create this program, to put that request for proposal out on the street, so one or more community organizations could apply to then develop this program and be paid to run this program, right?
Okay.
And I see. Go ahead.
It's all right. Go ahead.
Let's let Harmony clarify. That is the recommendation, right? Is that CASR would fund this, but in order to pay a community organization to do it, we have to put an RFP out.
Yes, and there's already people doing similar work like this. Cultivando, Women from the Mountain, and Black Parents United Foundation. We just don't have the funding or the scale that it needs to be. And Cultivando is focusing in North Denver and Commerce City, Black Parents United Foundation in Aurora. But this is a way to design a program to teach about the basics of Denver's pollution issues, Denver's environmental racism issues, and then where are meaningful places for Denver to participate in upcoming state and federal rulemakings to help to address these issues.
I guess the rest of my question was just, I think it's answered if CASR's running it and you're evaluating it as it goes, because it seems to me the thing to approve here is just phase one, and then see what comes of it and if it should continue. But if it's all something Kaiser is managing, then I feel comfortable either way, that you can determine how viable the first phase is for continuing.
And that's one
makes
of I did not mention that Kaiser would be a partner in this all the steps of the way to possibly do some of the subcontracting. And we need Kaiser to make this successful, as we need to come together with city agencies and departments and state agencies and organizations and residences, churches, businesses. We need everybody as much as we can to come on board.
Hey, Naomi, you're up.
Thanks, Grace. Harvard, you answered a couple of my questions in relation to like some of the nonprofits that could potentially be a partner in this. So thank you for that. And they're all, my personal experience, wonderful organizations. So happy to see their names. I was curious, so you mentioned state and federal regulatory space, and maybe this is just left to be open, but if there's like opportunities to engage in like advocating at the city level or state level legislation or regulations, like that could be within the purview too. It'd be like the community, I think, finding what are those, the nonprofit help bringing those opportunities to community to see if they want to engage. Does that make sense, or just rattle off a bunch?
I think it makes sense. I think the specifications that we had were trying to fit within the Climate Protection Fund parameters, but if that allows for us to engage with the city of Denver and push more there, I'm always game for that.
Grace could tell me.
I'm sorry, your question was, can this group then actually do advocacy work?
Yeah, I was just thinking about like community members, you know, engaging in maybe the rural process for an agency, or maybe just like educating council members. So not just state and federal, but if there was.
I think that's the kind of thing we'd have to look into once, you know, we get more into, like, if this gets approved and we actually take a look at it, if we decide to move forward with an RFP, we would probably have to be fairly specific about, you know, what are the activities that could be funded. So we'll have to look into that with the city attorney's office. I mean, I think that there's definitely concern of the following the dollars, right? And from what we even know from community-based organizations, they don't necessarily want city money to fund their advocacy efforts because they see the conflict of interest there. So it's certainly something that we would look into, and we can get back to you on that. Anna.
Hey, I have two questions. And I think the first thing I'll say is, like, I love this, my theory of change for the world matches with your proposal, Harmony. And then I've got some questions though. So the first one is, I'm wondering what folks think about where this fits into the purpose and mission of SAC and of CASR. Like, I think I get it. And I'm like looking at our SAC bylaws, and, you know, the purpose of SAC is to facilitate consistent engagement with external stakeholders to ensure the city's goals for climate action, sustainability, resiliency, equity, green jobs, and innovation are achieved. And so I think I'm kind of struggling to understand where this fits in there a little bit. And then I guess I'll just ask my second question, because I think they're kind of related. It's a little bit more of a structure thing and like redundancies thing, which is CASR has community engagement staff, right? Has, you know, there's environmental justice staff. And then we have SAC, like basically this huge kind of task force type body. Are there ways to do this within existing like staff and volunteer structure to avoid redundancies? And maybe there aren't any redundancies. I'm just kind of asking the question.
I don't think CASR has any environmental justice staff.
I thought I saw a position posted.
The position is posted. It has not been hired yet.
Got it.
So to date, there has been no one working on environmental justice as their role in CASR. We have transportation, we have buildings and those sort of things. So right now that's definitely a place. And for me, I sit on the EJ committee. And so I'm out here being like, we need something, and we needed something 2 years ago. So until that's ramped up, this is something to kind of plug in. And then also there's kind of a disconnect between the city and residents. There's a lack of trust. They haven't been doing a work. So even if somebody came on and it's just one person, the work that's needed and from my end is too vast for one. Even if there were 3 or 4, it would take them a long time to build the trust that some of the other organizations who have been on the ground for a while have.
Sure. Okay, I understand.
And then I tried to grab it, but in the Climate Protection Fund 5-year goal, one of the things that it specifically states as a goal is to increase meaningful participation for residents in upcoming rulemaking.
Cool.
So we're that's what I pulled from. And Grace,
Awesome.
maybe you have more to add to that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, if, or is the question about staffing?
No, it was how this aligns with the goals of CASR. And I was pointing back to the Climate Protection Fund goals. And some of the goals in there were definitely, and I don't know them verbatim, that is to increase community participation meaningfully.
Yes, that's right. And we've started working on that this year. And Liz, I saw you came off camera. Do you want to comment on the programs that you've been, the small grants that you've been working on this year?
I think I was on from the last time, but
Oh,
yeah, I'm happy to jump in. The Environmental Justice Support Fund is one of the programs mentioned in the Climate Protection Fund 5-year plan. And so we do have a portion of our overall budget dedicated to providing funding to community to do environmental justice work. And I think that in general, that is something that we are seeking to do, is to get that funding out directly to community. Some of the limitations, like Grace mentioned, some of the questions that came up about how we can specifically direct those funds, like to specific activities, are things that we would need to work out with city attorney's office, because there may be limitations. There also may be limitations on the side of organizations. If you are a nonprofit, for example, there are legal requirements of separating out 501c3 activity from 501c4 activity, which is advocacy, for specific legislation and those kinds of things. So we would have to be clear on those kind of lines, I guess. But in general, the idea that we want to get money out to community groups to do education, outreach, training is absolutely in line with our plans. And we have 9 purchase orders that we put together last year for some of these groups to begin some of that work, doing education, training, workshops in the community, just so people can become more aware of what are some of the big issues. What are some of the rulemakings that are happening at the state level this year that are going to have a big impact on air quality and health? So that work is already beginning to be underway. And I think that we want to expand and continue that work moving forward.
I'll just say, oh yeah,
ahead,
and real quick, I am my organization is one of the recipients of that funding, which has allowed us to have a community showing of Suncor Sundown and bring in the promotoras. And we had 45 people come and share a meal together. Even some students from New York City found out about it. And it was like beautiful to be teaching not just the community, but then setting examples for other cities as well. And we were able to do that with just the little bit that's already been given. And we're very grateful for that. And so excited to see what we could do with more. Yeah. And thank you, Kazar.
Thanks. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Are we ready to take a vote? All right, all those in favor of advancing this to CASR for consideration, please raise your hand. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you. And thank you so much, Harmony. Harmony, if you wouldn't mind, could you send me this presentation? Because there was some of the slides that we provided in advance were in your presentation, but it looks like you, worked on it a little bit. So if you could send me that, I will put that into the Google Drive so all the members can see it.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much. I muted myself. Now we're on to climate adaptation resiliency for the last of the proposals. And I think Jessica is presenting this one.
They are, I think. She's
You're
here.
on mute. Jessica's on mute.
Hi.
There you are.
I am here to help co-present with JR. So I was going to run through a very quick presentation about the Resiliency Youth Corps, and then JR will go into the actual request.
Okay, and I want to say Armando, Mr. Cashman, and Lashida, you all have your hand up. Is that still from the vote? Okay, thanks. All right, take it away.
All right, so the Resiliency Youth Corps, now called the Denver Parks Green Corps, was originally funded through a GOCO grant. Hold on one second, I have too many screens open. Okay. Originally funded through a GOCO Resilient Communities grant for 2021 and 2022 seasons. The funding was to start a youth program, workforce development program with Denver Parks. The funding essentially paid for our program administration and the youth salaries for those 2 years. We partnered with 4 nonprofit organizations who provided the youth workers. Denver Parks provided the projects for the youth to work on. So the program goals were workforce development, on-the-job training, focusing on our high equity needs communities based on Denver Parks and Rec's Equity Index, supporting the game plan for a healthy city, which is Denver Parks' strategic 20-year plan, supporting our resiliency program and our operations staff. So in 2022, the program touched 125 youth participants, over 30 projects, covering 55 hours of education and training, 30 speakers, 4 webinars, and 63% of our projects were in high equity need neighborhoods. So moving forward in 2023, since we no longer have the GOCO funding, this program is being brought in-house through Denver Parks and Rec funding. We currently have funding for our program administrator to be a permanent full-time FTE, and we have funding for 4 youth employees for this season, and that funding will continue. We also have funding for a vehicle, a van, for the crew to move around the city together. And then we have a small budget for tools and PPE, some training, and some project expenses. The long-term vision is to continue to grow this program over time. So this next year, we will be serving 4 youth in full-time as city employees. And we hope to grow that over time to 15 or 20 youth and expand it to a broader season. So having them work earlier in the spring and later into the fall to get a greater depth and breadth of experience with Denver Parks, and then potentially create different crews throughout the program. And then they could specialize and nest under our existing divisions to help them specialize their careers. So quick highlight of a couple images of the youth working last year, doing things like shoreline restoration and planting, erosion control, removing invasive species, doing open space management, removing certain types of vegetation, clearing vegetations from waterways, and planting pollinator gardens. So I will stop there and stop sharing my screen and hand it over to JR.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Hello, everybody. I'm going to go through kind of some bullet points or just a summary of the recommendation. And the recommendation is that CASR would fund at $123,000 to double the number of participants from 5 to 10, and to be part and house under the Denver Parks and Rec organization. And projects will address resiliency in parks and assist with maintenance needs resulting from workforce reductions, of course, that has happened from due to COVID-19 budget cuts. This recommendation also supports the goals of 1.2 and 1.5 from the game plan for a healthy city, which are resilient landscapes and ecosystem restoration. Let's see, the greenhouse gas impact would be medium at this point, and looking for ways for Denver Parks to actively utilize electric vehicles, bikes, ride shares, and public transportation. The recommended program will have it improve the climate adaptation or resiliency in Denver. It'll be both medium and short term. It'll provide 5 extra young adults who will receive employment and pay, give them the opportunity to gain professional development skills to grow their career long term. And the program will help build a more sustainable workforce for the city and a healthier, more resilient park system. The $123,000 is considered a low expense and should be considered as an investment that will pay dividends in the long term. And the overall, the rating, the equity impact rating was very high at a 12 with a maximum of 14. So overall, just there was agreement across the board as far as creating this initiative and moving forward with it. For the sake of time, I want to make sure that there's some opportunities for questions, either for myself or Jessica.
Well, let's finish out our formal actions by asking for a motion to approve in a second. You just use the raise hand function. We got Jim, thank you. And Naomi. All right, yes. Let us open the floor to questions.
Can you talk a little bit about the equity, how the program will be equitable? How did it get the score?
Yeah, so one of the studies that's been done already was through the rapid assessments they did in the various neighborhoods, finesse neighborhoods. And it really highlights the outreach that was done. I know I participated in the Northeast one, and high priority for the youth when we interviewed them was jobs. And the third most highest priority was from the residents when we interviewed them was to career development for youth and young adults. So that's definitely hits the equity as far as who's needing the jobs and the neighborhoods that we're going to be in. These recommendations are for the high equity need neighborhoods where work is being done and there's a demonstrated need. And when you consider the knowledge that's going to be gained, it's going to be given back to the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lori, I see your hand.
So under GOCO, how many folks were in this program?
Over the first 2 years, because we partnered with nonprofit organizations, the program touched about 100 to 125 youth per year because they were employees of those other organizations, not employees of the city. So most of the youth were involved for 1 or 2 weeks or sometimes 3 or 4 weeks maximum of employment directly with the city. The rest of their summer was spent on other programs outside of Denver through their nonprofit organizations. So the goal moving forward is that we'll have fewer youth in the program, but they will have a greater depth and breadth of experience across Denver Parks and Recreation and will be city employees.
I guess just a comment from my parks background, I completely support this. I just think it ought to be, I think Denver Parks ought to step up and have 10 or 15 people in this program and then have Kaiser add to it. I mean, it's just such an important investment and a great way to leverage dollars. And, I just really would encourage DPR to go on this harder than for employees, but completely support it. Thank you.
I see Stephen and then Mr. Cashman. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, JR.
No, the goal eventually is to expand, and as the presentation provided by Jessica. So whether or not it all depends on how quickly it can grow. Certainly, I agree with you as well. If we can find more money right away to increase that pool of employees, that would be the ideal situation.
Stephen, and then Mr. Cashman.
So yeah, thank you guys, because I'm very passionate about youth and workforce development, BOMA as well, working with DPS. So they have an internship program, and I'm wondering if there is a way that the number of applicants that might be over what you can handle, if there might be a way that we could work with Denver Public Schools to work on letting those students then work with the private sector through internships, if there's maybe a way that we could broaden it to where we can ensure that students that are interested in landscaping, arborism, whatever those things might be, can at least get some kind of connection into the industry. And so I just wanted to throw that out there I know that probably doesn't tie in directly to this proposal, but I think when we think of workforce, I think we might need to sometimes think a little bit broader when there's programs, because I know we've got probably 6 high school interns that are planned to come in this summer through the DPS program, and those students actually earn money through that foundation. So it might be a great option to connect into for those that are overflow.
Thank you. JR?
That's a great point. So through the GOCO program, our organization, Lincoln Hills Cares, was part of one of the organizations that work with Denver Parks. We are continuing this work, so it's not gonna go away. So currently, as of last year, we employed, I think it was 56 youth and young adults in our program, and our goal is to continue that. And the majority of the kids we do get, the youth, are from all walks of life, and Denver Parks is, Denver Public Schools as well, from the Northeast neighborhood to Southwest and so forth. So this one won't go away. We're not stopping our efforts as far as an organization. It's going to continue. And so we have connections through the school system and other community organizations that will continue to look for individuals that want to participate. I'm sure the other organizations will probably do the same. Thank you.
And Mr. Cashman had to leave. He had his hands up before, but he chatted me to say that he's in favor. So just FYI. Are there other questions or comments? All right, then let's take a vote. All those in favor of advancing this proposal to CASR for consideration, please raise your virtual hand. All right, it's a day full of unity. Thank you, everybody. We actually got through all of our proposals, but I see Jay was able to join us. And Jay, we had a little trouble getting quorum at the beginning, so we actually had bumped Liz up. So she's already given the summary, but you're here. We'd love to give you a moment, and we also want to thank and applaud you and your colleagues for all the work that you've done. And I gave a special shout out to your great big proposal. The biggest one for us, which was changing our goal from our emissions reduction goal, right? From 80 by 50 to 100% by 2040. But would you like to take a moment and say anything about the proposal and about your committee's decision?
I don't think so. I think a lot of us, looked at the other committees and saw really directed efforts at transportation or environmental justice. And then we sat there and we're like, man, go science and research. And then we sort of sat there and like, where does that really take us? So I think there was a lot of energy, and a lot of really smart people weren't sure exactly how to channel that energy. And that's been a perpetual challenge over 2 years. And I think we sort of floated the idea, do we even need this committee? And then should we jump on other committees? And then it just slowly matured, and we slept on it. Of course, we're like, yeah, that makes the most sense. So I think it was great because we were able to preserve people that still had terms to go on to other committees and bring their subject matter expertise. And, this is a new endeavor. And I think someone once told me half of art is knowing when to stop. And so sunsetting the Science and Research Committee to channel those energies elsewhere, I think is a smart thing to do. And it felt good after sitting on it. And I think most of our committee members agreed. So thanks everybody. And thanks Liz for bringing it up earlier. I didn't realize we were early. So thank you.
You weren't. I moved things around. And I think that I'm saying this out loud so that I don't forget. It's great that we have some of the existing committee members who decided to move to other committees, but in the future, when we have applications out, we'll need to do something to try to attract scientists and researchers for those other committees. So that'll be something that we should continue to talk about here at the SAC. You know, do we just want to do a special plug for them? Do we actually want to set seats aside? There's, you know, different pathways. So we'll want to think about that because the contribution from that community is really valuable. So thank you. Armando and Lashida, I see your hands up. Is that just from the vote? I'm guessing. Okay. All right. So we're doing okay on time. And actually, Johnny is not going to be able to join us. It turns out he had just family conflict and is not able to join today. So we're going to find another way to get you an update on that he was going to give. So we can take a little breath and we can actually give Lori and Taylor and now Blake some full 15 minutes to actually give us their own update and do an introduction with some new faces to the team. So Lori, do you want to lead that? Or would you like me to introduce Blake first?
Introduce Blake.
All right, everybody. And I think I do have a second person to introduce, but we'll get to that later. So we now have a manager of zero waste and circular economy. This is Blake Adams, who has joined us. It took us a long time to find him, but we're really happy he's here. He keeps reminding me that he is now in his 4th week with us, which sounds like a month, sounds like a really long time, but I was gone for one of those weeks. So as far as I'm concerned, he just got here. So Blake, why don't you take a few minutes and introduce yourself to everybody?
Happily, and for the record, it feels that way for me too, Chris. It feels like I just arrived. It's a pleasure to meet you all virtually. I really look forward to interacting with you all through this group and getting to know your own buckets and wants and needs and goals. My name is Blake Adams. As Grace mentioned, I'm the new manager for Zero Waste and Circular Economy. Still in evolution, I think, in terms of understanding what my role is and what our needs are, and how our team will fit in with Dottie and the collaboration there over time. But I'm coming, just a little bit about myself. I'm making my way from Washington, D.C. I spent the last 8 years there building their zero waste program for the city from the ground up. You know, I'm really happy to be here and I think I can bring a lot to the table. So I look forward to working with you all. And yeah, I'll pass it off to Lori or Taylor.
Well, we're really excited to have Blake because while Grace has been wonderful and joined all our meetings, we're just really ready for, Blake needs to catch up and get in the lead. So we can all collaborate with him on his great ideas. He has so much to bring to the table. And Grace, did you have someone else you wanted to introduce before I introduce Taylor?
No, I'll take care of that after you guys are done.
So we have a new co-chair and Taylor, maybe take a minute and just excited. Ash was a wonderful, wonderful co-chair and just got so overwhelmed with work that she decided to stay on the committee, but step down from co-chairing and Taylor is now joining us. Taylor, you want to say hi?
Yeah, thanks so much. I know Ash had big shoes to fill, but happy to try and step into that. My name's Taylor Ryman and I work for the city of Boulder. So another bureaucrat on board, and I live in Denver and I have a passion for trash. I've actually not my first rodeo on a board. I was on Broomfield's Advisory Committee for Environmental Sustainability as the chair of that Zero Waste Committee. And I know that our committee is coming off of a couple big wins in terms of Waste No More and expanded waste services. So I was happy to step in here and figure out where do we go next. And Blake has been just lovely to get to know over the screen, hoping to shake his hand one day, maybe give him a hug if he's a hugger. But thanks so much for having me here, guys.
Great.
Lori, do you want to comment at all about what you have been working on as a committee?
Sure, we've been fed by a fire hose by events like Expanded Waste Services and Waste No More. So we've certainly had no trouble generating content to spend time on. And now Expanded Waste Services is being implemented citywide. It's a fairly rocky implementation. People are trying to trade in their carts for the right size and moving to weekly recycle at the same time as compost gets put in place by this summer. But A1, the city's composter, has now just changed the rules for good reason, but changed the rules on what can be composted. So a huge amount of education and outreach and just really trying to support the efforts going on while knowing that it's a pretty big ask. And one nice thing is one of our committee members became the new communications person for the Expanded Waste Services. So that just has helped us really feel like we're working with her as part of the process. So just lots going on there. And then the Expanded Waste Services Committee that Grace is organizing, and I think you're running that. Two of our members are on that, as well as
You
somebody
dropped off
from
there, so I want to
here.
make sure everybody heard. That's Waste No More.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, so two committee members, two of the Zero Waste committee members are on Waste No More, and I saw Stephen raise his hand. He is also on the Waste No More task
Yes.
force.
Great. So we're really trying to be a part of that in any way that we can be helpful. We're also looking at, I think many of the committees are letters to the mayor, the new next mayor, about our issues and recommendations, and looking at what our new directions are going to be. We want to be wise about where we go in the future. And I think we have a lot of thoughts about food waste, and education seem to be rising to the top, but we're going to wait for Blake here and Taylor and sort of remake ourselves. One thing I'd say that's really fun, we've started having our different members. We have a great committee. Everybody is really a knowledge expert and really involved, and they're starting to host us at their locations. So we were at the Museum of Nature and Science and saw everything Patrick's doing with managing all the food service there. Next week is we're at Compost Colorado, and then we'll be at We Don't Waste. So it's just a great way, meeting in person, to bond on site in some of these locations. And with that, I think I'll leave it at that unless people have questions or Taylor wants to add.
Thank you both. Does anyone have any questions for the Zero Waste Committee? Or Blake? All right, great. Well, then I do have time to introduce another new person who just started with us a week ago today, Emily Gideon. And on my screen, she's in the middle, has just joined us as our new Director of Communications and Engagement. So Emily, could you take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. As Grace mentioned, my name is Emily Gideon. I am the new Director of Comms and Engagement here for the Climate Action, Sustainability and Resiliency Office. I have worked for basically most of my career in climate and clean energy communications, as well as conservation. Did for the past 5 years was doing a lot of policy and program leadership on a state level here in Colorado. And I actually had the opportunity to serve on the climate task force with a number of folks who are on the Sustainability Advisory Council. So I've had the fortune of getting to work with many of you before. A lot of you I know pretty well. And folks who I haven't met or worked with, I'm so excited to work with you. And also most recently, I was doing communications and engagement for the city of Golden. So a little bit of experience on the municipal side, working for another city, doing great work on climate and sustainability issues too. So that's a little bit about me. I am aiming to try to join some of these meetings. Please reach out to me individually if you want to ever chat. If you have some good ideas on engagement or further comms outreach that we can do within CASR, I am always open to new ideas and engaging with you all as as leaders here in the community. So my email is emily.gideon@denvergov.org, and I can drop that in the chat as well. Thank you all for all your time this afternoon. This is really exciting to see all of these great proposals from the community, and it's good to see and meet you all.
Thanks so much. And yes, I'm responding to Lashita's chat or comment in the chat. Yeah, it feels good to have our management team set, especially at this moment when we're heading into the administration transition. I think it really helps the staff to have that leadership in place, and it will be stable and steady no matter what happens. And then of course for you too, right? For the SAC, you have like the real leaders of the organization are here for you. And we have all of our subject matter covered. So you guys did such an amazing job today. I mean, all of you who presented, you were tight, you were on point. I can also tell that all of you read the materials before this meeting because you were prepared. You didn't have a lot of questions, and I think it's because you did prepare for the meeting, and I so appreciate that. This was a big one. I have a lot to add to that spreadsheet now, and we have a lot of work to do to get back to you. So we do have a couple minutes. Did anyone come with any comments, announcements, any other subjects that you want to address in this forum today? Lori.
Sorry, I have a lot to say today, I guess, but it's been really wonderful in this subgroup to meet in person. And I just think if we want to, as a group, commit to every other meeting or something, meeting in person, I think I ran into Naomi actually a couple of places. It's just great to see the real person, and I'd love to spend time with all of you. Grace, you had mentioned maybe doing that in July. I won't be there in July.
Said our next meeting is July, isn't it? I'd certainly like to try.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give it a shot, Lori. Thank you for that. Jim. I saw Jim and then Naomi, but go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I don't mean to jump ahead of you, Naomi. I just thought I'd mention real quick. There was a large group of organizations across the city put together a platform for a healthy, thriving, climate resilient Denver for all the municipal election candidates, and just thought I would let you all make sure everybody knew about that, because the issues covered in that platform are very similar to the issues that fall under CASR. So I would put that in the chat, and if you have any questions, please ping me offline. I don't want to get into political discussions, but just wanted to share that this exists. And if you have any questions, I can answer them later.
Okay, Naomi.
Thanks, Grace. Just to Lori's point, we are testing our committee, having a meeting at our office, at the Denver Foundation's office. We have technology that'll work in a hybrid manner. So if that goes well and there's spaces available, I'm happy to host you all. We're 10th and Grant, so we have access to transit, parking, and it's a nice open space. So just wanted to throw that out there. But
how many people does it seat?
Like up to 80 in the place I'm thinking of.
I'm definitely gonna hit you up for that. So our Waste No More task force wants to meet in person as well, but we have to be able to do high quality streaming like this. And we at the city don't have any rooms that can both seat that many people and do that streaming. And we're not likely to get that technology. So finding rooms that big is actually really hard.
Okay.
So I will follow up with you. Thank you for that.
Perfect.
And I was just reminded to replug our movie screening events on Monday. We have like 80 people registered for this, which is fantastic. It's really exciting. So if you think you might be able to come on Monday evening, there's still time to register. You can bring someone. We just ask that they register as well, so that we keep the head count, because we do have a maximum of 115 seats, but we obviously do still have seats available. So oh, look, Chelsea just dropped the link into the chat. So please do consider coming and bringing a friend if you'd like. Oh wait, and Jim is putting a note in the chat. Spur Campus. Oh, okay. I will follow up with them as well. Great, wonderful. Stuart, I see you came off mute.
Yes, I just had one suggestion. It would be helpful if periodically we could just have brief presentations from other cities. So like your counterpart in another city to kind of say, what are their priorities as they move forward? I think we're all breaking new ground. And, you know, that exchange, I think, could be tremendously beneficial.
That's a fine idea. And actually, we just had a really lovely visit with the climate team from Ann Arbor, Michigan. They were actually here in town for a couple of days. They visited with us and also with Boulder, because they also now have a dedicated climate tax. And so we also have a great network through the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. So we've got access to our counterparts in cities all over the US and Canada. So if there are particular cities that you're interested in hearing from, let me know, and I'm happy to reach out to them. But obviously not if you're going to have 5 recommendations in all of our meetings. But we can always do an SAC like lunch and learn. It doesn't have to just be a meeting, right? We can set up those opportunities virtually at any time. Wonderful. Other comments or announcements?
You know, Stuart, that idea is really awesome. And I think maybe Grace, your thought of a lunch and learn might be good, because maybe there's, especially if it's a virtual one, members of our committee might want to hear some of that stuff too. So it might be a great opportunity to engage some of those folks that aren't just on the SAC to hear what's going on.
Okay. Anna, do you want to comment on the link you just put in the chat?
Yes, I do. So CoPerk, Sierra Club, and many others are hosting a rally at the Capitol next Wednesday at noon, I believe. I just put the link in the chat for more information, but it's a rally to ask state leaders to push Xcel and investor-owned utilities to stop spending ratepayer dollars to invest in new gas infrastructure that we're going to be paying for decades and decades and will not help us fight the climate crisis. So if anyone wants to join for a lunch break at noon on Wednesday, I will be outside the Capitol and would love to see you.
Thank you for that. Any other events or announcements to cover? All right, well, we did it. You had a very, very productive meeting and we got it done on time and we didn't go over. So thank you all so much. I hope to see you in July and obviously hope to see many of you before then. Have a great evening.